Michael Doyle, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to, feels so formal, doesn't it? Welcome to the lockdown sessions.
Thank you, Brad.
I love it. Digital marketeer, executive coach, co-author. Michael, you and I have known each other for 6-7 years. We met on a coaching program actually and had that connection. I still remember the first time we met in that hotel room and you came over to say hi. And here we are sort of 7 years later, working together on coaching programs, working and mentoring with each other. And I guess part of this podcast series is to have conversations with people to understand what have they observed and where you're sitting in Australia at home with your family. I know life is going a little bit back to how things were now. I'll open up the same way I do every conversation. What have you been observing as you look out into the world during this time that could be some learning that we could take?
It's a good question, Brad. I love the word observing. And, straight off the bat, I've been observing kindness. I've been observing patience. I've been observing people, once they wrestle with the face of uncertainty, leaning into the change and enjoying various aspects of the change. And maybe because there's an idea that it won't be permanent, allows them to kind of play in this different situation.
Leaning in is such a great phrase. Do you sense when people go through this kind of change, they've moved quite quickly into that leaning in? Or because I know I've observed at the beginning there was this community feel that people had. I don't know if I'm sensing that anymore. I'm observing a slightly different, maybe it's the UK because we're not very compliant here. It seems to have shifted from let's care about the community to let's queue outside the giant supermarkets and forget our corner shops that were finding us toilet paper at the beginning. And I don't know if it's the same impact in Australia, but do you believe the kindness will carry on, or are we going to go back? I don't want to just snap back to how it was, hashtagging kindness and then 2 weeks later forgetting it.
I really don't know how to answer that question. Clearly, my point of view is a very small, selective point of view from around the area in which I live, where I think there was a lot of community pre-lockdown. But yeah, I mean, personally, I think that there's an opportunity for people to evaluate their choices and make a conscious decision to change from here on out. But there's also going to be, I think, this time where maybe some of those things wear back down to the way things were. So I think both are kind of true.
And when you think about it, say from the perspective of being at home, you were saying to me earlier, your wife has gone back into the office today, the kids are at school, and suddenly this is where we were actually a few months ago, you and I talking, and your afternoon, my morning, kids at school, wife's at work, feels a little bit familiar but also not. How do you feel you've kind of not changed so much, that's such a strong word, but evolved over this period? Like, so within yourself, what have you been observing, how you've kind of moved through this period?
Yeah, and I'm probably going to buck the trend here, and saying that, and I don't want to dismiss in any way anyone else's situation or the impact that COVID has had on their world. But for me, it was personally a very helpful thing in my life. I had been on a period of personal change, and I had kind of reached a point where I felt like the world was spinning so fast, almost like a train going by a train station, and I was on the platform and I couldn't get back on the train. And I felt that with COVID, the train finally stopped and allowed me to get back on. And I saw, particularly my wife's probably a good example because she has been an office worker for many years. I've been a work from home worker for many years. So it was interesting to see her have to adapt to work from home. And for me, it was just another day as usual.
How did she adapt?
Good question. She just did. I don't think there's any magic sauce to it.
No.
Necessity.
Yeah.
I have to adapt, so I will adapt.
But I think this is one of the challenges now that businesses have, because for so long, organizations, I've met many managers, I've coached leaders who have been totally anti working from home. You know, they're not the most trusting. They don't lean in to trust. They would say to me, you know, Brad, if they're working from home, they're not really working. They log in and then they're watching, you know, Oprah and morning TV, you know, as though daytime TV is something new. I mean, you know, it's been around forever. And for years, I fought this thing with my own family who thought, you know, they would ask me this question of, are you working this week? As if because I'm at home, somehow I'm not working. My mum would do this all the time. I'd speak to her in the evening, she'd, oh, are you working tomorrow? I'm like, Mum, I work every day. Just because I'm at home doesn't mean I'm somehow kicking back, having a lie-in. I believe that a lot of managers and leaders have had to accept the fact that their businesses operate totally fine virtually. And maybe we've teams themselves won't ever really be the same, because I have this feeling, and it's nothing more than a feeling, it's not based on any data, that teams are going to become this kind of hybrid. There are going to be those people that have to be in the office, partly because they need it and partly because they can't do their work away from it. And some are going to be at home, partly because they need that and partly because they can. And I wonder whether teams will ever genuinely be, you know, in the office anymore. And whether leaders now have accepted, you know what, our business actually works fine. You said you've worked from home for years. Me too. I don't need an office. I'm not sure I'd want to be in commercial property as a business right now. I think that could be challenging for you. But I don't know, when you think about, when you look at your colleagues, you look at your friends, you look at your peers, do you notice a nervousness to go back, or is there an anticipation and a desire to jump straight back? I need to get back to the office. What do you see?
Yeah, certainly with my wife, she is looking forward to getting back to the office. So in that, it's good to see that she's learnt something about herself, that she enjoys that office environment and that distinct separation between work life and home life. And I think there's something in there for her too about the commute to and from work being a transitionary moment in time where she can prepare herself from the day or decompress on the way home. That she might not have. I think she's learnt how to do that in a way from the morning going into her office and then coming out of her office in the afternoon. But to your point, it's when you talk about leaders not having trust or faith in the work from home model. I think that seems like a symptom of a deeper problem.
Go on.
In that, if you're a leader and, okay, I don't want to speak for others, I'll speak for myself. When I was leading a team, I had a way of creating goals with my team members, having checkpoints, not just one-on-ones, but also monthly and quarterly checkpoints to look at their progress towards the goals and also their personal development. And by having those things, I didn't have to stand over them and be updated on what they were working on or watch them working on it. We had those checkpoints, and in those checkpoints, it was evident through the conversations how they were progressing, if any issues were coming up, and we could deal with them at the time rather than getting to the end of the quarterly cycle and the person saying, I didn't meet my goal.
Yeah. But that's because you trusted your team.
Not just trusted them, we set up a process that gave them the opportunity to be responsible for their goal setting. I, as the manager, facilitated that to make sure it was in alignment with the department goals, the company goals. But they owned it. And then the opportunities in between, the one-on-ones, the monthly catch-ups and the quarterly catch-ups, were there to facilitate the conversation, which was all about them. How are you doing? How do you think you're progressing on these goals? Where are you having some trouble? Where do you think you need help next?
I like that, because actually what you're doing is you're creating a trail of accountability and a chain for them to know that there is those touch points with you that is about them. It's not just about getting the job done, right? They set those goals, and then it's about them owning them. My sense is that the leaders who are struggling less during this time are leaders who are comfortable in that world. Leaders who are maybe not having those regular touch points, one-to-ones are very much tactical, not how are you. I mean, how are you takes on a whole different meaning during this. I've learned that for sure. But something I did observe on a webinar the other day, we were running a session on resilience and positive psychology. So we had about 40 leaders on the call. And by the time we got to the end and we were just talking about sort of what things they could do to kind of create a more positive psychology in their teams, they were saying that what they had missed wasn't their team, because they were having loads of Zoom or MSN Teams, chats. They were missing chats with other teams. They really enjoyed the fact that they were on a call with everybody across their level as opposed to in their team. And it was such an interesting point, because when one person made it, suddenly you just saw on screen like 30 people nodding as they all realized what they were missing was bumping into you outside the office, going to the car, because they meet with their team all the time. Actually, what they missed was those ad hoc chats. And I wonder whether what people have missed about work isn't their team. We've all been connected. We're not actually that disconnected. What we've missed is the wider connections with people. It made me think about work, and maybe going to work isn't about being with my team. Going to work is just about being with people. It's actually nothing to do with my team. I see them all the time. It's like my family. I see my family all the time. It's all those other people that I miss. And I don't know whether it resonates for you, but I wonder whether this lends itself to the challenge of the psychological safety piece of going back to work, or the kids going back to school, or parents waiting outside schools for kids. If the world has to change, are we feeling psychologically safe and prepared for it? As a coach, if you've got somebody who's feeling nervous about that, how do you help them get comfortable with this new landscape?
I just get curious about it. I just want to dig in and explore. It's an unfamiliar world to me. I've been working from home for a long time, and you've brought up an interesting point about serendipity and the digital world. Maybe the two of those can't really exist, or maybe that's the question: is how do we have those moments, or how do we create those moments in a digital world?
Because my mind boggles at it, right? we were doing the team and I were doing a little like we called it a team huddle. We started it at the beginning, and essentially what it would be is the 5 of us would come on the call twice a week, Monday and Friday, and no mobile phone, not me running it. And we'd start with our thumb up, thumb down, or thumb sideways to let the other people know what kind of space we were in. If your thumb's up, positive space, thumb down, not such a great space, thumb sideways, maybe you need that exploring. And then we'd spend 5 minutes going around the kind of the virtual room where everyone would explain the background to their thumb up, down, or sideways. And then one person within the team would have set a task before the meeting. So mine might have been a Netflix series to watch, or a movie, or a question to consider, and then we would debate it. And as we started to do that, the guys would say, actually, why don't we invite so-and-so to this? And this sort of got me thinking that actually, even during lockdown, we are still quite connected. The digital world allows us to be connected. So why are people feeling so disconnected? And I'd be interested in your view here, because have you observed anything that gives insight into this connection and disconnection? Because we're so digitally connected anyway, right? We're hyper connected, actually. How come in a hyper connected world people feel so disconnected? Is it just a physicality piece, or is it more?
I don't know, and again, maybe I'm bucking the trend. It's maybe because I've been working, from home for so long. To me, they just feel like two different worlds. Like I can step into the online space and that feels like a world, and then I can be in the physical space and that feels like a different world. So I don't feel disconnected from people. I've reached out a lot more to people during this time. And going back to the point of missing those moments of bumping into colleagues, it reminded me of a manager I knew who would make a point to just kind of like find people in the company index and like randomly email them and want to meet with them for 30 minutes just to find out who they were and what they did and what they were working on. It freaked a few people out because, like, okay, you're a very important director. Why are you talking to me? What have I done? But I think there's a tremendous opportunity. I mean, I wanted to ask before, when you heard of this this person or these people talking about we're not having these moments of bumping into people. Did anyone kind of think to do anything, or was it just like a comment? And
no, we explored it a little bit. So someone raised the question: how could we recreate that culture of being a family and an extended family? Because there were these comments popping up. You could see them popping up in chat, going, it's so nice to see everybody. And when we started to unpick that, everyone was having twice a week meetings, whether it's huddles or scrums. They're all meeting with their teams. We're connecting. Not everybody knows how to use MS Teams or how to use Zoom, but by now I think one of the lessons I've learned is the entire world now knows how to turn their video on a conference call. It's great, because prior to that, I think people weren't always video ready. or my dad sending out Zoom invitations for his 40-minute free calls with people. He's loving it. And he's part of the generation that's been isolating since like the beginning of March. And as we talked as a group, people were trying to start coming up with ideas. Was there a way of creating like a cafe in the virtual world, maybe a specific room that opened at 8 and closed at 3, like canteens do in offices, where you could, during the day, just pop in to the canteen? And the tech guy who was on there said, we can do that. We just dedicate a room. And if you want to, you go into MS Teams, you join Team Room 1, and whoever's in there, don't spend all day now, you got work to do, but pop in. And I guess they were trying to find ways of doing that. Someone made the joke saying, what happens if you pop into the canteen and the only people in there are people you don't want to talk to? And somebody else said, well, just like in real life, you turn around and walk out.
Oops, sorry, wrong button.
Exactly. And I guess look, ultimately nothing really recreates that that sense of being able to be with people. But maybe it's because you particularly have worked in it, and I work alongside the tech world. Maybe we're quite comfortable in the digital space. My mum's a piano teacher, Michael, and she's converted into running her piano lessons through Zoom. But she needs to be with those kids. She loves sitting next to those kids and teaching them. I wonder if when we move through this to the next stage, I feel like we're in a recovery phase now of this pandemic. Like the scary bit is done. Now we're in a recovery phase. There may be a second wave or another spike, but ultimately people are trying to find ways of going back to work, going shopping, getting life back to normal. I wonder if when you put your coaching hat on and you think about the challenges people will face readjusting, do you think there are lessons that we can learn? There are tips that we should be adopting. There's approaches we should be trying that speed up that curve? Because I feel like we're going back to the change curve again. Like we've been through it at the beginning of the pandemic, and now we want to go back to the beginning again and go through that whole process again. And I wonder, with your experience, both office-based, home-based, running your own business, working in the digital space, in a communication space, what could we, maybe people who are listening to this are saying, how am I meant to just walk through this process? How am I meant to approach that in a positive way? How am I moving through this curve? Again, are there, I don't know, strategies that you've either seen or used yourself that maybe if you shared with others, it would be like, maybe try this, or maybe that approach would help you move through that, or lean in a little bit quicker? I guess I'm saying, have you got any guidance that you think, do you know what, Brad? If you try that, it might just help you move a little bit quicker through this process.
Reflect on how you made the transition through the first part of this. Identify the parts of that you want to repeat and the parts of that you don't want to repeat.
Yeah.
And iterate.
But you say reflect in a way that instantly suggests that people know how to do that.
Mm.
And I actually think that people don't, or they're not used to that reflection. I mean, some people are deeply self-analytical, but reflecting and drawing learnings isn't as easy as it sounds like that. I mean, what are the questions you would ask yourself, for example, when you're reflecting on your learning?
What did I like about that experience? What didn't I like about that experience? What did I learn about myself as I went through that experience? If I were to do it again, how would I do it differently? I think that'd be some good starter questions, at least.
And what did you like about this experience?
What did I like about it? Throw my own question at me. Nice.
Yeah,
move.
sorry about that. Once the coach, always a coach, Michael.
Yeah. What did I like about it? What I liked about it was less to do about me and more to do about the world, in that it's a unique moment in time that we're all going through a similar situation together. And so what I felt was a connectedness to many others around the globe that I'm not normally connected to. And this is an interesting point to come back to, because we've been talking about not feeling connected. And here I am talking about feeling deeply connected in a very different way to people I've never met.
Right. Or ever will.
Yeah, or ever will. You know, Brad, that stumbles onto a thought I've had for a while now, which is this idea that from the moment that you're born to the moment that you die, the people that exist in the world during that time are the only people you ever have a possibility of meeting. So it's almost like it's your life cohort.
Right.
And if you were to think about other people on the planet as your life cohort, how might that change your behavior?
Yeah, well, that's actually given me a little tingle, actually, as you said it. So I know that what you just said resonates very loudly. For me, it is, and it's what you've made me feel when you said that was the globe has an opportunity to be empathic right now, because for the first time in history, everyone's experiencing the same thing at the same time. Okay, we might be a couple of weeks before or after each other, but essentially the whole world is experiencing the same thing. We all know what we're going through in varying degrees.
Yeah.
Even down to a lack of toilet paper on the shelves of the supermarkets. We've all experienced that.
Yeah. I grew a beard during the lockdown phase. And I'm terrible at growing beards, and they look terrible on me.
Okay.
And after a few days, my family was very quick to point out how bad it looked.
Right.
And I didn't really enjoy it, but I persisted with it for about 8 weeks, not really enjoying it the whole time. But the one thing I did enjoy about it was it made me feel more connected to, other men growing beards at the same time.
I like your style. My beard is just grey. I've worn a beard for years because I'm just lazy and hate shaving. And the hippie inside me has always wanted just to live with a long hair and a beard, kind of John Lennon circa 1968. And the only feedback I get from people on my beard is how grey it looks. So I just embrace that. And
Well,
might keep it.
If they start calling you Gandalf, we've gone too far.
Right, exactly. Although from a kind of ideological way, if they do start calling me Gandalf, I could associate and identify with that, and I take that as a compliment. And I'd probably want to be a bit awkward and go, do you mean Gandalf the Grey or Gandalf?
It reminds me of walking my daughter to school one day, and she said, "Daddy, you have big feet." And I said, "Thank you." And she said, "It wasn't a compliment." And I said, "No, you get to put it out there. I get to choose whether it's a compliment or not."
Right, I like that. Nothing wrong in having hobbit's feet, Michael. Just to keep the Gandalf analogy going. You said a couple of things before when you were talking about the questions you ask yourself to reflect. What do you like about things? What don't you like? And you shared both of those. Do you feel you've learned anything that you take with you in this period from a business point of view? As a coach, as a writer, as a comms expert, you live in the digital space, you coach in the digital space, you write in the digital. Have you taken something that's sort of encapsulated this 3-month period that you feel like actually that might shape how I do things or how I feel or operate in things?
A little. I'm going to answer that question, and it might not be the direct response that you're looking for. But I'm working on a piece right now. So what I observed was the art of the business pivot. I observed some businesses were very quick to transform their services to digital services or remodel what they did in their physical space in a different way. Restaurants preparing reheat takeaway meals, for example, businesses rapidly converting. And I saw other businesses kind of just throwing their arms in the air, like, we're doomed, there's nothing we can do. And I started to wonder, like, what's the difference in mindset? Or are there just like some business geniuses out there that know how to do this and others don't? And so they'll never cross the pivot chasm, I started calling it. Anyway, I found a company that did this really well, and I've been talking to the business owner and writing an article on this. But essentially, he managed the transition. I'm spoiling my own article here, but he managed the transition because he understood the why of his business. And so his observation was, and he's based in the UK, and his observation was, look at the high street. Some bars think that they're just a bar. And so it's very difficult for them to transition to anything else in this climate. Other bars think of themselves as a place where they provide excellent food and beverage and service to make people happy at the end of the week. And so therefore it's much easier for them to make a transition to, creating a little pop-up shop that sells ice cream and soft drinks. And so it really came down to the crux of understanding your why. Why do you exist in business? And then from that, you can make a pivot by, in his case, framing up some constraints about what can and can't be done, and then creating some prototypes and experimenting with them, being willing to look foolish in the experimental phase, and learning from that until you can rebuild a product. And the interesting thing is, now that he's been able to do that, he sees that as the way forward for his business. So he might not ever go back to the old model.
Right.
So to answer your question, to come back to answer your question, I think that's the takeaway from me, is how to learn to be able to pivot quickly, because there will be other situations that come up in our lives, and I think we're fortunate that this was a situation that was global, and so there's a lot of empathy. But the next situation might be hyper-local, and there may not be that level of empathy there. And I think being able to dig deep in yourself and work out a way forward is important. Well, that's important to me, and so that's the key lesson that I've taken away.
I love that, because it almost brings us full circle. We started off thinking about actually what were some of the observations, and then we kind of end with this kind of learning for you. And maybe what you've done for me there is you've created perfectly the that phrase, the pivot chasm, because I think those of us, and there's an element of Darwinism in this. It's not about survival of the fittest, actually. It's those who can change the quickest that survive and thrive. And it's not just about thriving. I get that. Some of us, I even said it myself, it's about surviving with my mental health intact. But I do feel that what you said there, that lovely point, so, crossing the pivot chasm, is about being honest enough to take a look and say, actually, what is my why? Why am I doing this? I think that's a great circular version. I feel like I've been on a run with you, Michael. We've sort of gone round. We've come to the sort of starting point, having gone round in a nice big sort of lake. That was great. Will you be prepared to come back in a couple of months' time when the world starts to look a little bit different again, and see if we can reflect on these learnings and see what's going on then?
Oh, absolutely. Would love to. And by then, maybe I will have learned something and be able to say, oh, I don't believe anything of what I said to you the first time, Brad. It's completely changed.
And in the meantime, will you grow a beard for the next sort of 6 weeks so I can see what you look like with one?
I will not. I will not. My daughters won't give me a cuddle at night if I do that. So no, it's gone.
I'll stop recording at that point.